DiTerlizzi. This is my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I'm wearing my newer fancy booktube hat, and today I'm bringing you my monthly recommendations video for the month of August. Now, over the last week or so, there has been an influx of new subscribers to my channel, so I want to say thank you and welcome. I am incredibly pleased that you're all here. In case you don't know, Monthly Recommendations is a Goodreads group created by Trina from Between Chapters and Kayla Rain. I'll link the information for the group down below. Every month, they give us a topic, and booktubers and bloggers can then go and create lists of recommendations based on that topic. But this month, August, is a very special month because it is the 1-year anniversary of the group. Now, I have not been a member of the group for that long, I have not been on booktube for that long, but the group is celebrating its 1-year anniversary, and they are doing this by giving us a special topic where we get to choose a book for each of the previous month's topics. So there are 12 topics here, and I get to recommend a book to you for each of these 12 topics. As you can see, I have a ton of books here. I have sort of decimated my shelves, and I'm looking forward to this very much. So here we go. Topic number 1 is an underrated book. It's been sort of a running gag that for many of the monthly recommendations videos, I end up with a Robin McKinley book on the list. This hasn't always been true, but it frequently is. And so I decided that for this one, I was going to go with what I think is the most underappreciated Robin McKinley book, and that is Dragonhaven. Now, I think that this is underappreciated in part because it's sort of mismarketed. Now, Robin McKinley is sort of known as a YA author. She is known for her fairy tale retellings, and that is not this at all. She is also, if you know her for something other than her fairy tale retellings, known for her 2 urban fantasy novels, and that isn't quite this either. So if you were to pick up this book, you would probably think that it is, you know, a boy and his dragon teen fantasy. I would argue that though there are dragons in this book, it isn't even really fantasy because there is absolutely no magic. This is a sort of alternate contemporary reality in which there are dragons and some other things that are science, that are different from our world. McKinley also isn't really giving us a standard boy and his dragon story arc. The plot elements are there, but this is ultimately a book about dragon science and dragon conservation. It's about how difficult and unglamorous raising an illegal dragon might be, and its teenage protagonist is a sort of awkward and unwilling narrator. So I think people looking for a young adult dragon romp perhaps justifiably feel somewhat betrayed by this book, but I really enjoyed it for what it was. I'll link my Goodreads review of this book below. The second topic is a book set in a school. I actually don't have anything for this one because for most of my reading life I have been in school. I am no longer in school, but for most of my reading life I have been. And while I was in school for all of those years, I really strongly disliked reading books about school. But I do have a book on my TBR that I believe takes place at least partially at a boarding school that I am very, very excited about. So this is going to be a TBR show-off question for me, and I am really looking forward to reading Among Others by Jo Walton, and it does take place at a school. Topic number 3 is a creepy book, and you may have noticed if you watch my channel that I don't particularly like to be genuinely creeped out by books. It's just not something that's a pleasant experience for me. So creepy tends to be a negative factor for me in books. An exception to that rule, though, is the sort of book that is sort of creepy or unsettling while also being really lyrical and beautiful, like sort of dark, creepy fairy tales. And a really good example of books like that are these. These are In the Night Garden and In the Cities of Coin and Spice by Catherine and Valente. These are the 2 volumes of the Orphan's tales. I suppose you could call this a duology. You have to read both of them. Each of them contains two sort of self-contained books. So I suppose it could have been published as a series of 4 books, but instead it's a 2-volume set. And these consist of nested stories within stories, and they are often dark, and they verge on very, very disturbing, but they're so completely gloriously imaginative that they're totally intoxicating. The next topic is a trilogy, and for that I am going with my most recently read trilogy that I've really, really liked, which is the Thessaly trilogy by Jo Walton. The first book is The Just City, the second book is The Philosopher Kings, and the third book is Necessity. I recently finished this trilogy, and I posted a full review of it yesterday. I don't know if it'll still be yesterday when this video goes up, but I'm gonna link my full review for this trilogy if you want to go check that out. It is about Plato's Republic and Greek gods and robots and time travel and stuff. That sounds interesting. You can go watch my review. Number 5 is a book you think others should read ASAP. I think this was the December theme, so it was by the end of the year, because at the time the year was almost out. So for this purpose, it's just like a book you should go out and read right now. And for that, I am going with a book that I put off reading for a long time after I purchased it, because I tend to make books wait their turn. But I regret putting this off a little bit as much as I did, and that is The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making by Catherine and Valente. If you have been thinking of picking this book up, it is the first in a series, and the series is now completed, so you have no more excuses. So now is a great time to dive right into the series, and I'm very much looking forward to reading the rest of the books. The next topic is a fantasy book. You may have noticed that most of these so far have been fantasy books, but this is a great opportunity to just pull out some, really great fantasy that I'd like to encourage a lot more people to read, and that is The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. This is a book that I read last year. It was one of my favorite books of last year. I've been spending most of this year trying to physically restrain myself from setting everything else in my life aside and just rereading this book. I will reread it at some point pretty soon, probably. This is a kind of classic fantasy novel that I went for a really long time in my life completely unaware of. I know a lot of people grew up with the film, the animated film adaptation from the 80s. I didn't know about that either until after I read the book. I did recently watch the movie. Basically, it just made me want to read the book again even more. This is just a stunningly richly written book. It's fairly short and it is utterly magical. Can I convince you? I am just going to read you the first paragraph so you can hear how lovely this book is. The unicorn lived in a lilac wood, and she lived all alone. She was very old, though she did not know it, and she was no longer the careless color of sea foam, but rather the color of snow falling on a moonlit night. But her eyes were still clear and unwearied, and she still moved like a shadow on the sea. Ooh. The next topic is a book with little or no romance. For this, I have chosen a book that I don't actually have right here because I got it from the library when I read it, and that is The Lie Tree by Frances Hardinge. This is a young adultish book. I've seen this author's work categorized as middle grade, although I think, at least in the US, this is being marketed as YA. The protagonist is 14, which is kind of on the borderline. Some authors might give a 14-year-old a romantic storyline, but she does not in this book, because this book already has so much other stuff going on in it. There is a murder mystery, there is magic, there is history, this is a historical fiction novel, there is feminism, there is science. This book does not need any romance, there is plenty going on. The next topic is a standalone, and for this I've chosen another book that was one of my favorites of last year, and that's The Goblin Emperor by Katherine Addison. I would happily accept a sequel to this book, or basically anything else in this world, because this world is really, like, stunningly, intricately rendered in this book, but this book is a standalone. It's a fantasy novel of court intrigue that relies pretty much entirely on the strength of its characters and on the strength of the cultural setting that it builds. Instead of like action scenes, there are no action scenes. I really loved it. Overall, it's basically like a very warm and compassionate elf and goblin politics and court intrigue book, and I think that's really great. Ooh, I should mention, standalones were where I jumped in and joined the group, so that was where I started making videos. So for standalones onward, you can go back and find my videos that I did that month for these topics. I will provide the links for you in the descriptions. So the next topic is a survival story, and I have since read one that I think would be really good for this topic, and that is The Search for WondLa by DiTerlizzi. This is a middle grade, whimsical sci-fi book, adventure, and it's just a lot of fun. It's about a girl who's been raised in an underground sanctuary until suddenly she has to survive on her own on the surface, and the world outside her sanctuary is completely strange and not at all what she's prepared for, and she has no idea why this is. This is gorgeously and richly illustrated, and there are lots of wonderful alien creatures and strange things and environments, and it's really beautiful as well as being, you know, a bit of a fun romp. The next topic is a friendship story. For this one, I'm also choosing a book that's gone back to the library. The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers was the first book I read this month. It is basically a big group friendship story in space. It's a sort of ensemble-based book about the crew of a wormhole tunneling ship, and I will be talking more about it in my wrap-up for the month, but that is definitely a friendship story that I've read since I did that topic. The next topic is a book set outside the US. This was for the around the world or travel-themed topic. As I pointed out when I did that video, I read a whole ton of books that don't take place in the real world, so this was a little tricky, but I've got one that I didn't use in that video, and that is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Now, this is a British book from 1938. This edition calls it a modern masterpiece of romantic suspense, and romantic suspense is probably the right way to describe this. It's very atmospheric, it's very psychological. The first person narrator doesn't have a name. She refers to herself as I, and you never learn what her actual name is. But this book actually does sort of have a travel theme because it starts in Monte Carlo with the British characters abroad vacationing, and then the majority of the book takes place back in England. I am in America. These are places that are far away from me. And the last topic here, which was last month's topic, was empowering female leads. For this, I actually wanted to point out a book that I will be doing a review video for fairly soon, that I also read this month, and that is actually a book that's not published yet, and that's The Queen of Blood by Sarah Beth Durst. I think I'm only giving this 3 stars on Goodreads, but it's like a happy 3 stars. I actually really enjoyed this. And the thing I liked most about this book was probably the protagonist. This takes place in a world where the nature spirits are malevolent and are trying to kill the humans, and human civilization is protected by the queens of the lands. Because only women in this world have the magical power to control the spirits and make them work for good instead of evil. So already that's a very girl powery premise. But what I really like about Delena, who is the protagonist of this book, is that she is trying to get by with what is actually a very small magical gift, relatively speaking, and she is spending the whole book trying to figure out how to do the most that she can with the small amount of magic that she has. I think that's a really great twist on the trope of magical girl out to save the world, and it's a twist that I really enjoyed because it spoke to me personally. in some interesting ways. So this is a book coming out in September that I thought I would give a shout out to for this topic. So that was a quick run through of all of the topics that Monthly Recommendations has given to us for these videos so far. If these topics appeal to you, pop over to Goodreads. You can watch other people's videos that they've posted in the group for each month. And if you have a channel or a blog, you can join and participate yourself. I think next month's topic is science fiction. That's going to be really cool. Please leave me a comment if you've read any of these books and want to chat about them, if you have any questions about any of these books, if you'd like to talk about other books, you know, that might relate to these, any number of things you could talk to me about in the comments, please do if you want to. Okay, that is all. Bye for now.